So far, as we read the letter that St. Paul wrote to the Corinthian community, two things that maybe some of you don't know yet. Maybe you're just here on a Saturday morning. The first is he's encouraged them to seek the divine wisdom of God and not the worldly wisdom. And so what's the difference? Well, like when one goes after divine wisdom rather than worldly wisdom, like which one way is it different? Well, it's different in which the second thing that I want to point out is that the Corinthians are fighting amongst themselves about who they belong to. That is, some members in the Corinthian community were saying, I belong to Paul, and they were boasting their pride, their ego over that. Like maybe some of you say, well, I belong to Father Miller, and you speak highly of it. And then others might say, well, no, I belong to Father Kuna, and you speak highly and boast about that. And then in the boasting, there's division, competition, and disagreement. And so St. Paul wants none of this. And so again, he's addressing those two things, divine wisdom. And what does divine wisdom look like? It's not proud, it's not boasting, but rather it's humility. It's humility. And so as we look at maybe the conclusion of this part of the letter, this maybe train of thought that St. Paul is having, really the only thing that I really want to point out, as we kind of wrap that part up, is St. Paul kind of does this. He goes, okay, you want to boast of Paul? You want to boast of Apollos? You want to boast of Peter? Well, here's what our lives are like. God has exhibited us apostles as the last of all, like people sentenced to death. We have become spectacle to the world, to angels and men alike. St. Paul has drawn on a contemporary image there. When an army would defeat a nation, they would have a parade, back into the city, parade into Rome. And at the end of the parade were the enemies, the captives, those who have held captive, kind of bringing up the rear of the parade, and they were kind of humiliated. And some of them, in that parade, in that march, at the end of the parade, it would also then be sentenced to death. St. Paul says that's where we are in this line. That's where I live. That's where St. Paul lives. And he goes on, we are fools on Christ's account. We wonder about homeless, we toil, working with our own hands, we ridicule, we're persecuted, we're slandered. We become like rubbish of the world, the scum of all to this very moment. This is how St. Paul identifies himself in relation to the world. Rubbish, scum. And so he asked the Corinthians, do you belong to me now? This is what I am. This is where I live. This is where I function. Why? Again, St. Paul's not pursuing it just for the sake of making his life miserable, but he's just following in the footsteps of his Lord and King. This is the way the King went. The King came into the world, proclaimed God's love, proclaimed that God wishes to enter into a permanent, new, and everlasting covenant with you. This is God's desire. And there's a lot of people that do not want it. And not only do not want it, but they want to destroy it. Because it challenges their worldview, it challenges their ego, it challenges their pride, it challenges their pursuit for power and money and wealth and prestige. It's a challenge to that, because you have to hand it over to God, place it all in God's hands, and know that God will take care of you. A lot of people don't want to do that. And so if you're in the ways of God and you want, I want this covenant, we have to know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to hate you for it. And so, like I said a couple of weeks ago, just the appearance, the arrival, the presence of Christ brings division. Brings division in the community, brings division in the family, and we're going to even hear more about that this weekend. Again, more challenges to what being a true disciple means. It's going to be tough to hear. But if you want to belong to St. Paul, and you want to brag about it, you want to boast about it, then you have to enter into the mindset and mentality of Paul's, which is also that of Christ. Willing to be rejected by the world and willing to lose everything for the sake of the kingdom and the sake of the covenant with God. May God bless you.